In this video, we're going to talk about some other organelles that are really important inside a cell. The first one is the ribosome. Ribosome is an organelle that every single cell has. That means bacteria has it, archaea has it, plants have it, animals have it, fungi has it. All cells have ribosome. And here's the reason. Ribosomes make proteins, and every single cell needs proteins. If you think about the last video that we watched, the cell membrane has proteins in there that allows a lot of activities, and we'll talk about that at some point. But ribosomes make those proteins, and there are other organelles that needs proteins. And there are other parts. If you're a multicellular organism, there are many parts of your body that needs proteins, right? That's why we say you have to drink milk or eat certain foods so that you can make more proteins in your body or get more proteins. So ribosomes make proteins. That's the main function for ribosomes. The components of the ribosome is RNA and proteins. Interestingly, ribosome that makes protein is actually made out of proteins. So we have ribosomes that made proteins for other ribosomes. And where do you get that initial ribosome? You get it from your mother. It comes from the cell that you come with. The initial fertilized egg, this one cell that you start with, it already has ribosomes, and this ribosome can make more ribosomes and make more proteins and more DNA and more cells, and it becomes you eventually. The location. There are two places that you can find the ribosome. One, inside the cytoplasm. Remember the jelly that encloses, that has all the organelles floating around in it. You can find ribosome just floating around in your cytoplasm. You can also find ribosomes that are bound onto other structures. So this structure that has ribosomes on it is called the rough endoplasmic reticulum right here. The rough endoplasmic reticulum. See, it's a handful of words to say. You can call it rough ER or RER. That's easier to say. The rough endoplasmic reticulum is rough because it has all those dots on it, and all those dots are ribosomes, as you can see right here. The cells that produce a large amount of protein, such as your liver cell, contains millions of ribosomes, because if your cells need to make proteins, it needs ribosomes. And you can kind of think of it as a factory for a small business. This factory is really, really important. It makes a lot of proteins. So now we can take a look at rough endoplasmic reticulum. Again, it's rough because it has ribosomes on it, and what is the function? It transports material around the cell and it synthesizes proteins. So there are material that can come into the rough ER, and it mostly sends material out. So when it makes proteins on the ribosomes in here, it will actually go into the inside of the rough ER, this part, which is called the lumen, and then the protein will fold into its correct shape. Remember, our monkey, we have to fold the protein in order to allow that protein to function. So the protein gets folded inside the rough ER, and then the protein will come out of the rough ER and allow itself to go somewhere else, and we'll talk about that in class later. So, of course, the rough ER has two important functions. It makes protein, and it sends proteins around. And you can kind of think of it as a UPS that sends stuff around. The next one is called a smooth ER. The smooth ER looks very similar to the rough ER, but it's smooth. That means it doesn't have ribosomes. But it still does a lot of really important things for our body. For example, it synthesizes steroid hormones. So the hormones in your body, a lot of those are synthesized by the smooth ER. And other lipids can also be synthesized at the smooth ER. And it detoxifies the cell. So when a person, let's say your father, if he drinks beer, a beer is actually toxic for your cells. And how does your cell live through that toxic environment? The smooth ER can break down the toxin and allows the cell to be just fine. Okay. And the smooth ER connects the ER to the Golgi apparatus. So if you look right here, this is a nucleus. This is a smooth or the rough ER, and then the Golgi is outside of the smooth and rough ER. We'll look at more pictures of that later. The next one is the Golgi body. The Golgi body does an important job as well. The Golgi body modifies, stores, and packages proteins. When proteins are made in the rough yard, some of those proteins can be sent then to the Golgi body to further process it. It's kind of like putting a stamp onto an envelope. Where is this protein supposed to go next? This protein doesn't know where it's going until it goes to the Golgi body and gets processed even more in there. So if you read this little paragraph right here, there are proteins and other materials from the endoplasmic reticulum. They can come to the Golgi, they'll come into the Golgi and then get further processed inside the Golgi and then being released outside of the cell. And where is it going outside of the cell? The Golgi will put tags onto the protein. It's like putting stamps on an envelope. Well, actually the address on the envelope, it tells you where this envelope is supposed to go or where this protein is supposed to end up. Okay, so I understand that this is a lot of information, but as we go over this more and more and we'll do the cell project, it'll help you understand it a little bit better. And here's a structure, the structure that contains the protein that comes and goes in the cell or comes in and out of the Golgi. These are called vesicles. The next structure that we are going to look at is called vacuole. The vacuole holds water and salt and protein and carbohydrates, mostly for plants. So plants, this right here is a drawing of a plant cell. As you can see, this plant cell has a gigantic vacuole that stores a lot of water for the cell. Why does a plant cell need water? Because photosynthesis requires water in the process. So plant cell needs that water, but as you can see, it doesn't rain every single day, but the plant cell still wants to live. So how does it do that? It can store water so that the plant can use it later on. Why does a plant need to do photosynthesis? It's because photosynthesis produces sugar, which is food for the cell. Here we go again. Here's a vacuole. And basically, you need to know that a vacuole is a membrane bound. So every time you see these boundaries, they're membranes. That's a membrane. These are little tiny membranes. Okay? And then all these other ones, you don't really have to know. All you have to know is that a plant cell has a really large vacuole. Animal cells can have vacuoles as well, but they're way smaller. And we're going to skip that. Vacuoles versus vesicles. Vacuoles store water. Vesicles contain materials for the cell and allows transport. So if you look right here, it says vesicles store and move materials between organelles. They're kind of like your Amazon boxes that allows the transport of a certain material to a certain place in your cell. So that's a vesicle. It helps with the movement of the material that needs to be moved. The next organelle is called lysosome. Lysosome is kind of the recycling bin or the garbage can of your cell. It helps digest a lot of things. So for example, we call it a digestive, it's kind of the digestive system of your cell. It has digestive enzymes. Remember, enzymes are made out of proteins. Remember we said ribosomes make proteins and it's really important? Here's another reason why ribosomes are really important. And what can it break down? It can break down all kinds of stuff. If your cell, let's say it gets invaded by a certain toxin, or a bacteria, for example, is being digested by a white blood cell, is these lysosomes that help digesting those bacteria. So you can digest basically all of the macromolecules. The next structure is the cell wall. The cell wall only exists in plant cells and bacteria cells. There are and archaea cells. There are other organisms that have cell walls as well, but you don't have to worry about it at the moment. So for a cell wall, it provides a structure and strength for cells. So if you think about a plant cell, it kind of expands when there are a lot of water in there, and it shrinks when there aren't a lot of water. When you look at a leaf on a really dry weather, right, the leaf kind of goes down a little bit because it doesn't have enough water to allow all the cells to to expand to its full capacity. So what does the cell wall do? The cell wall prevents your plant cell from exploding from having too much water inside. And it helps maintaining the shape of the cell even when there's not enough water inside the cell. So what do you have to know? You have to know the function of the cell wall. You have to know that it's made out of cellulose. So this is a good word. Cellulose is a carbohydrate that makes up the plant cell wall, and algae. Look, another organism. And then that's it. Animal cells do not have cell wall. You should know that as well. The next organelle is called a chloroplast. A chloroplast is the location that's responsible for photosynthesis in plants. So I want you to draw out and label a few parts of the chloroplast. I lost my mouse again. It's hard to see this. All right, here it is. So this picture, I think, is printed on your notes. If not, you can kind of draw one that's very similar. So you want to draw two membranes at first. All right, here's another organelle that has two membranes. Does that remind you of mitochondria? So right here it has two membranes. We have the outer membrane of chloroplast and we have the inner membrane. The next one is we have these stacks. Each one of this stack is called thylakoid. So each one of this little disc is called a thylakoid. If you have a full stack like this, you need to label that as grana. Chloroplast is special because chloroplast also has DNA and it can self-replicate. This should remind you a word called endosymbiosis. Chloroplast, scientists think, also came from a bacteria. We have a big cell that engulfed a small cell, and then this small cell became a part of the plant cell and eventually became a chloroplast that functions for making food for the plant cells. We're going to skip this one. So we have chloroplast that has chlorophyll, which is the pigment that actually allows photosynthesis to happen. And it's the pigment that's actually green. But there are also other types of pigments, but you don't have to know what they are yet. Now we're going to talk about a few types of ways that a cell can move. First one is called a flagella. Remember, bacteria has flagella, but there are also cells in your body that has a flagella. A flagella is basically a little tail. It's just one tail outside of the cell that moves kind of in an S shape that allows the cell to move around. Okay, where can you find it? You can find it in prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, and they're quite long. And they're made out of something called microtubules, which is, I lost my mouse again, which is right here. These are microtubules. The next one is called cilia. So instead of only having one long tail, you have many short little tails. It's kind of like hair, many short hairs all around the cell body. And it kind of just goes whoop, whoop, whoop to allow the cell to move. So cilia are small, short hairs that surround the cells. As you can see right here, you see those little tiny, tiny hair. And we're going to watch a video in class at some point if I can remember. The next one, we're almost done. This next one is called a pseudopod. And we have to watch a video of this one because it's kind of hard to imagine. So what happens is you have this cell, right? This is a cell. A part of the cell will start stretching toward a certain direction, and it'll drag the whole cell over. It'll start stretching a little bit and drag the whole cell over again. So it's kind of like forming little tiny feet. As you can see on this picture right here, you can form a little tiny feet and extend in a certain direction, and the whole body of the cell will follow. So this is called a pseudopod. The last one, I think, the last one is called a cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton is what allows the cell to move, and it helps maintaining the structure of the cell. I don't know if this one is on your note. If not, just listen to it. Because it is quite important. The cytoskeleton, just like the skeleton for your body, the cytoskeleton forms the structure for cells. And it helps with the movement of the cell. So if you look right here, we have these cytoskeleton, and when we form the pseudopod that's extending and allowing the whole cell to be dragged over, the cytoskeleton is allowing that job to be done. And then a few more things on the cell membrane. The cell membrane is selectively permeable. This is a really important word because selectively, permeable means something can go past it, right? But selectively means sometimes this material can go past, but sometimes if this material is not supposed to go in the cell, it will get stopped. It will not be able to go in. So it helps protecting the cell because we don't let everything into our cell. And a lipid has a hydrophilic head and a hydrophobic tail. So if you look at these little ball shapes, that is hydrophilic, meaning it likes water. That's why it can be exposed to the outside and the inside of the cell, which is a watery environment. And then you have these hydrophilic tail, which hates water. So they meet with each other and be as far away from the water outside and the water inside. So these are your hydrophobic tails. Oh no. Hydrophobic tails and hydrophilic head. Again, this is a fluid mosaic model, as you can see. There are lots of structures that are embedded in the phospholipid bilayer. And we're done. Congratulations, you just learned all the most important aspects of a cell. And we'll do lots of practices. And remember, I'll post a Quizlet to help you study these structures as well. I understand this is a lot of material, but I know you can do it, and you know you can do it. Bye!